I'm here talking with John Lees and Alex Cormack. I reviewed their comic Sync, the first issue of it, which is coming out this September, and it's a mini series. And they were kind enough to speak with me about the comics. So, Alex and John, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about yourselves and Sync. John?
Hi, thanks very much for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. I'm John Lees. I'm the writer of the book. And in case you can't tell, I'm Scottish, so I'll try to speak clearly to make sure my accent's understood. I'm a comic writer. I've done a few things. I'm probably best known for a horror series called And Then Emily Was Gone. Also did The Standard, Oxymoron, Lovelace Nightmare. I recently did a issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Universe, and Sync is my latest project. As David said, it's launching in September. It's basically a kind of pulp noir crime series. About like a series of interconnected standalone tales which all kind of have a shared location of Sink Hill, which is a forgotten district of Glasgow where strange nightmarish things tend to happen.
And I'm Alex Cormack. I think my accent's fine, but I'm from Massachusetts, and I'm the guy that draws Sink. And also the other work I've done, a handful of things. I just recently did Red Dog for 451. I drew Oxymoron, Lovelace Nightmare with Comic Tribe. Do a book called Future Proof with Bliss on Tap, and I have done another book called I Play the Bad Guy, also with Bliss on Tap, and another book also called Crossing from Red Style Media, and a lot more stuff. And also, everybody check out John's book, And Then Emily Was Gone, what he's talking about. It's a phenomenal book, and I always try to tell people to read that, but it's really good.
I won't disagree.
Yes. So, so I know there's some like real life backstory to Sync. You said Sync, it's sort of a crime horror comic that has a variety of interconnected tales with certain elements that connect them all. And I know some of the ideas for Sync came from something that actually occurred in sort of the 90s. Well, it kind of occurred, it kind of didn't. It's an urban legend that a lot of people think is true and may have been, but can you explain a little bit more about either of you, just to about the sort of the origin that kind of served as the spark for Sync?
Well, the big story that kind of is like the kind of calling card, especially in the first issue, is an urban legend which was around when I was a kid and growing up in Glasgow in the 1990s. And as listeners have researched, apparently there's variations of it all around the world. But the story is basically that there was a blue van or a white van, depending what part of like Scotland you were in, but it was the blue van when I was told about it, which was just filled with clowns, which would drive around, like kidnapping kids, and like there was variations, like depending on like who you asked, what would happen. Either like the clowns would just kill you, or they would eat you, or they would like disfigure you and like tickle you, like to make the cuts in your mouth open up more, or, like or like to turn you into a clown and make you, or you just disappear forever. And basically, it was one of these like urban legends. I'm sure there's different variations on it everywhere in the world, but it was one of those things where there was always like one kid in your class who knew somebody whose like brother was taken by a clown or something like this. It's one of these things that was kind of almost true, almost had that kind of thing, but never quite. But it was actually a real hysteria about it because a lot of people were kind of panicking because like Glasgow's a working class city, so there's like blue workmen's vans everywhere. So every time like there was round, people were panicking. Like kids were refusing to leave the schoolyard because there was like vans like nearby, and eventually it reached such a fever pitch that like we had to have like the local police constable like come to our school and say like there's no such thing as clowns in a blue van, like don't panic. And all the kids are going, of course that's what they tell us,
Yeah.
So so, and it was one of those things where it's huge. It's a massive thing when you're a kid. I mean, like when I remember one summer holidays. I must have been about no older than 6 or 7. And like my older cousin and a few of his friends, and I kind of tagged along, all kind of went around in search of like these clowns, like with like our own like makeshift weapons, like sticks and stuff. And like, I don't know what we would have done if we'd actually found them, but died horribly. But it was one of these things like this big first great adventure, like searching for these clowns, and that actually became the basis of a later story in the series. But it's one of the things that was such a big thing when I was a kid, but then you kind of forget about it as you get older. And it was a few years ago, someone mentioned something about it. It was like, I remember the blue van clowns. I was like, and it was like a flashback moment. You were like, oh my god, like that's just kind of all came rushing back. I remember it all now, and I thought that's actually an awesome story. So I started researching it and trying to find out what the history of the story was, where it came from, and I kind of dug back into it. I thought, I want to make this a story. I want to make a story out of this. So I kind of was already developing an idea of like a kind of crime series set in Glasgow, and this seemed to be the kind of perfect thing to just bring it all together. A kind of iconic image to kind of anchor the series on. So that's the story of that. Hopefully that answers your
very cool. So with Sync, I know. So sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I just love that you point out with the going back to the beginning, we talked about the vans and clowns. The idea that you're kidnapped out of these things and then just go would you start tickling and you. You're fearing so no.
Right, no, but that was kind of goofy. But I love the idea that you did a twist on that when I told you, and you have like the laughing gas instead.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's something that would be scary.
Yeah,
I mean, plenty of people already just don't like clowns, and when you're a little kid, you're scared of monsters and clowns, and I mean, it's a variety of scary things combined into one. And I mean, and I remember, like you said, it was actually reported in newspapers. People were that afraid of it potentially being true that it was in newspapers, hey, tell your kids to look out for these vans. It got to a point where you didn't know how much was true and how much was fiction, which is of course the best thing with a lot of urban legends.
I mean, literally, I've literally just got it round the corner and down the stairs. But I've actually, someone sent me, a friend of a friend sent me this old copy of the Glasgow Guardian from 1991, and in the front cover is killer clown scare with killer and clown with a K, killer clown scare, and then the big, because it's the local news, it was the Glasgow school dance might be cancelled because of the worries from parents of the clown. Obviously that's what classifies as news in Glasgow, but
it was a similar time.
Yeah.
Yes, so each issue of Sync, you said it's kind of they each sort of stand alone but interconnect. So first of all, you might want to say how many issues of Sync will there be total? 5. So each one sort of stands alone. Right now, 5, but they all interconnect. That was going to be another question I was going to ask, if you have plans for more stories set there. But right now, it's sort of 5 stories, and they all stand alone but interconnect. What gave you the idea to sort of make each issue stand alone, but also play a part in sort of an overall kind of framing narrative?
Well, I think for me, it's I've always had a bit of an obsession with one-shots or anthology stories. Obviously, comics is a rich tradition of them, where it's Tales from the Crypt or stuff like that. But for me, what I was bringing in is a lot of stuff on TV, which I was using as touch points, British television in particular, TV shows Inside Number 9, which is a really kind of twisted, dark British series from the makers. I'm not sure if you guys have got League of Gentlemen over there, but it's the same people that made that, and it's each story is a standalone tale, with the only thing connecting them being that it's inside Number 9. It can be a house, which is Number 9 in a street, or it can be an apartment that's 9, or it can be a warehouse Number 9, it can be any number of things, and that's the kind of thing that connects them all, and each one's its own kind of standalone story. Or the stuff Jimmy McGovern does. There's a guy, kind of TV writer that's famous in the UK, did a series called Accused, which was each issue was a court case. It was the person on trial, it would go back and tell the story about how they ended up on trial. And I've always loved things like that, kind of things which start off standalone, you start to see connections, it becomes part of a larger world. Obviously the big touch point for that in comics would be Sin City as well, which has been something that's been referenced quite a lot, with Sync. So yeah, I just love the idea of doing something like that, and then kind of exploring the kind of limitations of the one-shot format, getting in and out, and telling a self-contained story, but also kind of using it to make a bigger tapestry.
And then, so sort of now a question sort of about the art for Alex. Alex, how did you approach it where, to sort of give everything, because it's set in sort of reality, but it's a twisted version of reality. I've only read the first issue, so I don't know what the later ones might hold, but it seems like there's no, swamp monsters or anything too fictional. It's things that could be real. It's just real things that are, of course, very wrong, because Sync Hill's very wrong place. How did you do it where you made things scary, but not, over the top? Just sort of tell me about how you approached the art process for everything.
Sure. There's going to be a swamp monster now. I'm going to do something. It's going to be hidden in the background, just for you. But no. Well, the big thing with the art, and this. When we started this, we were talking about all the stuff, and it got to a point for me. I was like, well, listen, this is all in Glasgow. This is all in Scotland, and I'm from America, and I want to make sure this is like if you're from, I wanted somebody from Glasgow to be picking this up and kind of recognize, oh, I know these areas, opposed to me just kind of like Sink is a lot very kind of made up town, but I wanted to have a feeling of like this could be like, yeah, I kind of know where that is type feel to it. So about a year ago now, my wife and I we went to we flew to Scotland to visit John, and we basically just John took us on a one-day walking tour through the fabulous streets of Glasgow, and we saw the nice area, and he just took us like, all right, here's like kind of the crummy areas and all that, and it was just funny because I was walking around with my wife who was pregnant at the time, and I had this big camera, and I was taking pictures. I looked like a complete moron tourist, just like click, people are trying to go to work, and like, who's this asshole? Like, oh, excuse me, click. Whoa, look at that. So I have a folder that's just a ton of these photos from our walking tour. So especially in the first issue, that first sequence when Alan is like that club is based off a club that John took us to. It was like I remember they had I can't remember what it was called, but it had like a nice stage where they would have like live performances, had a real nice bar in the background, and I think we did like a little video there, didn't we?
Yeah, mono, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of based it on that place, but everything else is you can actually walk to, like where he goes to see the bus. That's actually John's bus stop. Kind of where he goes is what our walking tour was.
Yeah, I pretty much took him on the route that Alan would take to get from like the point where the book starts to St. Kill. So like someone can read the comic and they can kind of like follow the route that Alan takes, and it all makes sense. All kind of joins together.
But then for art wise, I mean, so a lot of that early stuff was really like tons of photo references of where we went. And then once he got to Sink, a lot of the backgrounds got a little darker, everything got a little grimier. Took photos and kind of mashed them all together and drew from that. And just try to make it like a town that only like 3 stoplights or like street lights are working. And there could be like 5 guys out of the alley, but there could be nothing out of the alley. You just can't see, and it's just creepy neighborhood that you don't want to walk barefoot through.
Yeah, and of course, while Sink Hill itself is fictional, like how much of it was drawn from like reality and real life experiences? Because of course, one big element of Sink is when there's sort of a message delivered about how Alan thinks he's so much better than the rough guys trying to attack him, but really there's not too much separating him from them. He thinks he's a member of this. He thinks he's an everyday guy, but he's not. He just buses into the town. So like, how much of Sink Hill is drawn from like your own sort of I guess it's more for John because he of course lives in Scotland. How much is drawn from your own personal experiences, and how much was sort of you thinking up fictional things? How much comes from you, and how much is from fiction, sort of?
Well, I drew heavily from my experiences of being disfigured by maniacal vandals of for me, like, obviously, there's definitely a big aspect of it that's relatable. I mean, like, I come from, like, not too far away from Rutherglen. Rutherglen was where I grew up as a kid. So that idea of, like, busing into Glasgow from Rutherglen is something that's familiar to me. Probably the first inklings of, like, those stories of being when I was, like, late night bus journeys, like, travelling out of Glasgow back to Rutherglen and thinking it wouldn't be nice to, it wouldn't be very nice to have to walk through that. And obviously I've had to walk through, like, parts of that journey before, like, to try and catch a bus, or because I've missed the bus, and like I've been all around. I mean, I've been to the US and stuff, and people say like, how can you walk around like New York at night and stuff? I'm like, New York's fine. I mean, New York, like, there's always people out, like, it's never scary or anything. I think Glasgow at night time is much more like creepy than New York. I mean, especially when you get like just off the city centre. Someone was trying to say, what's it like at Glasgow at night time and a Friday night? Like, once like the buses and the closed down, the pubs are letting out. And the best description I could give is it's a bit like the scene in Apocalypse Now when they get to the camp and like the senior officers have kind of vanished and the Vietcong are kind of like flitting around in the corners and stuff.
Kind of ominous.
Like that's like kind of like and I wanted to try and kind of convey that into the comic, but also I think although there's a lot of kind of Glasgow elements too, I think it's kind of a universally relatable thing. I mean, when I've been pitching this like conventions and things, I'll always start with, have you ever been out a night out in the town with your friends, you've missed the last bus or the last train home, and you've had to walk home alone through a bad part of town? And a lot of folk will say yes, because it's something that's happened to a lot of people. It's a kind of universally relatable experience, and I think that's why, if the first issue is scary, I think it's scary because it's kind of grounded in the relatable reality. Like, people have had that experience of missing a bus and being a bit drunk and having to kind of walk home late at night. People have had the experience of some kind of like drunk kind of like, delinquent kind of walking up to them and kind of trying to make a chat with them, and they say the wrong thing and kind of get offended a bit. So it's one of these things, like, where it's like kind of, hopefully that's what makes it scary, because like I think that's what makes the scariest things, like human experience, a familiar experience, kind of turned up to 11, like just to the worst possible version of it. I think that's what I tried to capture with Sync, and hopefully it worked.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things when you first told me about this first issue. Is I mean, I feel like anybody who's like moved to a city or lives in a city has a story. I know I got a few, and I was gonna say what you were saying before. Like, this is something I kind of identified a little bit with Alan, is that, or kind of knew about Alan, that when he's saying that, I'm from Glasgow and all that stuff, it's like, nah, you're from the suburb. I mean, I grew up like half an hour outside of Boston, but people where I grew up will tell people they're from Boston. They're not from Boston. We're from the suburbs. It's nowhere near Boston, but it's just kind of use that as a landmark. And anybody that like had to live in Boston and do all that type of stuff, and I mean, they're like, you're like cheese ball from the suburbs. You don't know what you're talking about. And the whole thing, just him walking home. I mean, I remember one time on like my 22nd birthday, I fell asleep on a train, and I woke up and the train was completely empty, and I had to walk home from this train station in the middle of the night. And I remember one time that I used to work at the aquarium in Boston, and I was at a friend's house, and it was like all the trains and all the taxis, all the stuff everything was just closed, and I took a wrong turn, and I was basically kind of in St. Kill version of Boston, but I was wearing a lime green shirt on with a big penguin, and I was like, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do?" And I tried to look tough, and I found out later a friend of mine drove past me and saw me, and I was like, "What's that idiot doing? He's gonna get shot."
Although me and Alex together had a kind of Sync issue 1 Blue Van Country experience at Chicago at C2E2. It was like subsequent party that was at like the convention centre, and we'd been off for dinner, and they kind of got an Uber to drop us off, but they accidentally dropped us off at the wrong side of the convention centre, and it was like the kind of industrial estate, and we couldn't find a way to get through. We kind of walked into the building, it was all sealed off, so we had to kind of go out and kind of walk around through this wilderness, and like it was like four of us, we were all kind of joking, we getting increasingly nervous as we couldn't find a way out, and like that's the kind of thing I was kind of drawn from as well when I kind of went back to the story.
Yeah, I mean, that went for miles. It wasn't like we were in the back of this building. It was like a 3-mile walk just to try to find any sort of.
That's the thing I hopefully wanted to kind of convey, like in the story, this idea that you can have something that's safe and familiar and kind of bustling, and there's full of people. And all it takes is like 15-20 minutes walking, and suddenly you're out of the safe zone, and like anything could happen.
Yes, so I've read the first issue. I haven't read the later issues, but what can you say about sort of the upcoming issues of Sync? Because I know, like, the first issue, I think the cutoff for it maybe has happened, but because each issue stands alone, someone could easily jump in with any issue number and enjoy it. So what can you say about, I don't know how much you want to disclose about, issues 2 through 5? What can we expect based on the first issues, about a man named Alan who sort of gets lost and ends up in Sink Hill and things go horribly wrong? What can you tell me about issues, 2 through 5, of what you want to disclose about those to, get us excited for what occurs? I imagine more unpleasantness.
Well, I'll give you a little rundowns of each issue. I will say that I was pleased with issue 1 turned out. I think issue 1 is probably the weakest issue in terms of my script, at least. I think each issue gets better. Issue 2 is called The Door at the End. It's about a woman called Sharon who specialises in disposing of dead bodies for paying clients, and but the body that she's disposing turns out to not be as dead as she first thought. And issue 3 is called A Head Full of Wasps.
That one's
one of the most notorious, dangerous, infamous thugs in Sink Hill who left years ago and now lives as a trans woman in Edinburgh, and her her former childhood friend has been murdered, so she has to kind of travel back to her old life to investigate and face all the prejudices and all the demons in her head again, which is like the one we're kind of currently working on now. And we've got issue 4, which is Young Team, which is the one I was talking about, which is based on my experiences of clown hunting as a kid, where a kind of group of tearaway kids go off into St Kill in search of the blue van clowns and find a very different kind of evil. And the last issue is called White Dog, which is a young woman searching for a missing dog, and she ends up kind of in the rabbit hole trail down the hierarchy of St Kill's criminal underworld. Hopefully that gives you the kind of
cool.
thoughts version.
That's quick, right?
And,
Quick rundown, that's it.
cool. And assuming that these issues do well and are popular, do you have further plans for Sinkill possibly in your mind, or is that something that you haven't even really thought about yet, or what like how's that sort of?
Well,
you were talking about a new story just the other day.
Yeah, So we've definitely got. I think of all the ideas I've had, this feels like the biggest one, but it's one I could go back to, and a hint of stuff like in bigger stories, even in these issues, which I don't quite touch on to. Like this could be something we could explore later on, like Mr. Dig. He's a character that kind of appears in issue 1. He's like a vigilante in a fox mask, and he kind of appears in other issues. He's a kind of mysterious character in the fringes. I've got a whole backstory for him figured out, but I'd love to explore in future. There's a story I was talking about with Alex as well, which I have an idea for. Like, I was basically, when I was watching a movie called Death in the Maiden, I had an idea of a story called Death in the Midden, which like a Midden's like a dump in Glasgow, and like I've got a whole bunch of other kind of story ideas kind of floating around, but obviously it'll all depend on the sales and the response to this issue, or this volume. So if you read issue 1, or you want to read the review for issue 1 that David's kindly shared on his blog, and you want to see more, please get to your local comic shop and request to order in the series, because if we can kind of get a good response to the series, that would be the surest way to kind of do more. Although I'll have to ask Alex if he wants to draw more, because I'm not sure he does.
Oh, sure.
And you guys are being published via Comics Tribe. How did you guys hook up with that publisher? What made you want to go with them as the publisher? Because there's so many publishers in comics. I always find it interesting, how people choose what publisher they want to work with and how it's been and such.
Well, do you want to hand this out, or want me to handle it? Or we'll both
you get more fun than accent to listen to. I mean, if I was listening to the show, I don't want to be listening to you. So,
for Comics Tribe, we've always had a good relationship with Comics Tribe. They published my first comic, The Standard, and they also published The Nemo Was Gone. Did really well with them. And actually, they published Oxymoron, The Loveliest Nightmare, which is how me and Alex first got to working with each other. So it kind of like a kind of obvious choice to kind of keep that kind of harmonious, mutually positive and agreeable working relationship going.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And Sync is of course kind of like horror and crime mixed together, and it balances really well. Do you have any other story ideas unrelated to the Sync universe that fall into other genres, or is that your favorite kind of genre to work in, the horror and crime? Or do you have, because in Oxymoron, of course, I've read that one, that's pretty scary and crime filled too. So I'm just wondering, is that sort of your favorite genres to work in? And Alex, what do you especially like to illustrate, or do you guys have an idea for a happy fluffy bunny comic even, or something?
Tell them about your romantic comedy.
Well, I kid you not, one of the things I'm currently pitching around is a kind of gentle romantic comedy, just kind of like a swimming pool based sports adventure rom-com, where nobody dies. Actually, one person dies, but it's not too violent.
No shovels to the face.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it's for me, it's not necessarily that I'm only interested in horror. I'm interested in all kinds of genres. I just seem to happen to gravitate towards horror. It's something I kind of enjoy a lot. Especially when you're working with Alex, who does gore so well, it's irresistible.
But yeah, for me, gore is fun to draw. But I'm kind of for I like to keep an open mind on things. Like I said, horror is just a blast to draw, especially because it's fun to draw kind of scary characters and try to scare people with the drawing. And that was especially with the clowns.
The clowns are terrifying.
Yeah, well, the thing is, and when I was growing up, I didn't watch it. It's solely because of that. I'm not afraid of clowns. And I'm just one of these guys. I get it, but it's just not one of the things that scared me when I was a kid. So that's what I did with this. I'm like, all right, well, that's the case. Figure out a way to draw some clowns that I would be afraid of. If these guys were around, I'd be like, oh man, I'm in trouble now. And that was a fun challenge, and it was a blast to do. And I had like a few sketchbooks. I was just like, all right, is this too? How does this look? How does this look? And just went from that. It was just a blast. And that's the fun thing with horror, opposed to like like a courtroom drama or something like that, where everybody's just some people in a suit. I mean, you can draw people kind of look weird, but it's just kind of straight ahead people. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun to do. But yeah, as far as like doing like a superhero book, that'd be fun. And just I'm kind of open up to all things, but just horror is just always the most fun. You get down and dirty, and it's a blast.
Is there anything I haven't asked you guys that you wanted to mention about Sync or any other projects or anything?
Yeah, I think you've covered the bases really well. I think the big thing, just to reiterate, that Sync comes out in September, and then it runs monthly from there. So go to your local comic shop and let them know you want it in. Or depending if you're listening to this and like it's already came out, go and see if you can find it in your local comic shop.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn more, you can go to the official website, sync.comicstribe.com, and sign up to our newsletter. Or you can find me on Twitter at JohnLees927.
I was actually going to ask how people can contact you, so go ahead.
There you go. And I'm on there as Alex Cormack 4. Not the first 3, but number 4. That's me.
Fourth best Alex Cormack.
Fourth best. There's 3 other guys who are doing fantastic. Much better than me, but I'm still doing better than number 5, wherever that slot is. So, and on Facebook and all that type of stuff too.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to talk with me. And yes, I want to encourage everyone who reads the blog and listens to this to check out Sync. So yes, thanks again, guys.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.